stronger. We get bigger.
I got BEEF with BLOODS.
This will always live. I'm on there.
King Tone is a thug.
Fucking recording, huh? Hold that shit.
KINGS, my squad.
King Tone could have changed the history of Puerto Rican young people in this city.
I was one of the few leaders that used to say, don't kill that brother. I never conspired to kill one of my own people.
Take your last breath. This shit here to the death. I'm on the rate. And all the motherfucking snakes, they got another fucking answer coming to them.
Right.
I'm on their rate.
And that is the brand that I inherited from the CEO of the Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation in New York in 1990. I'm clicking and it's not changing. Don't get me mad, I'm King Tone, damn it. Let's try this again. So you see, what I found was when I inherited the Latin Kings, we had to figure out how we were losing our friends and alienating people. But I wasn't born King Tone. I didn't just show up, I'm Orden Rey, and I became a thug. I was 8 years old. My mother and father entrusted the school system as a second-generation Puerto Rican coming from Puerto Rico to get that dream, that American dream. But she didn't know on Fridays my teacher used to torment me because I spoke Spanglish, because I was the other. And I couldn't spell as well as those who grasped the English language. So I got mad at that sucker. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be rich. And I'm going to get there a different way than you, because in my block, when I stopped coming here on Fridays, I started analyzing how it works. And there's these guys on the corner, and they make shit happen in my neighborhood. And they make it when we're hungry. They always got money, and they always let us be successful in the way they found it. But the problem was that these guys were into the business of the misfit economy. They sold heroin, dope, marijuana. So I studied how they did this, and I said, this is the quickest route to the capitalistic dream that me and my mother and my father are struggling with just to get enough to eat. So I devised a plan to get rich in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the 80s in New York. We let the murder rate for 8 years in New York City. It was popping. And I was getting in as a 9-year-old into the drug trade because I wanted to be rich. I didn't want the values that my mother taught me. I didn't want it. I was intruded by those marketing experts on TV that telling me if I bought what they told me, it would make me better than the values that my mother taught me. I wanted to be American, wanted to be rich. So I opened this quick little scheme with another 13-year-old and 14-year-old, and we got to the heroin business at that age because the marijuana business got into violence. And when there was murder, I learned it doesn't let us make money. Bad idea, violence and selling drugs. We were already doing something illegal, why add another thing? So we stopped and we figured out how we're going to do this. And I remember what I learned from sitting on the corner and observing the very people that I was just now going to start selling things to. And I remember, so I took what they gave me and I gave it out to free to everybody. Just as a tip, as a drug dealer, if somebody gives you drugs, don't give it out for free. It would make the guy who gave it to you really mad, the CEO. Like, what do you mean? So he came to me on a Friday, said, hey, I want my money so we could continue this business. What's up? And I sat in a car, scared as a young man. I said, listen, what I did was I distributed amongst the heroin addicts because I knew that in the morning they get sick. So I went early in the morning and I gave them COD, cash on delivery. I gave them the dope and I told them, if you bring me customers, I will give you one in the morning when you're sick. I will give you one in the night so you won't go to sleep sick and waiting for that back pain. And most of all, I'll give you $1 every bag you bring me of a customer so you could get one during the day without going to pick up bottles for the 8 hours to get one bag. Guess what I did? I shut down the dope market in East New York. Me and 3 guys under 20-year-olds were making $600,000 for a grown-up every 3 months. But something happened. When your product and your brand and yourself lose the values that you were brought to, and my mother's value, hey, respect, don't worry, you'll get everything in time. Just don't do nothing wrong. They were haunting me, so I started getting high on my own supply because I was running from the reality that I was poisoning the very people I love just to be rich. And I knew there was something better than that. So I ended up in jail in Rikers Island when I was like 18 in 1986, and I stood there to 89. I didn't know how to read. I was an addict, and I was hopeless. And the Boy Scouts, the Marines, and the social, all those programs, boys clubs, did not come to save me. Did not come to give me direction, the church or nobody. You know who came? This group in the jail. They were known as the Latin Kings. And they had this little pride about them. And they had protection, and they had unity. And one of their members came up to me and said, hey, how would you like to join us? Because you're a pretty stupid guy. You start a lot of trouble, and you don't know what you're worth. Do you know you're a hero, that you come from the bloodline of heroes, the Arawak Indian? And I was like, who is that? Knowledge, understanding of self was given to me. And he locked me in a cell, so later I could tell you about staying 3 years in the cell. But he locked me in a cell with his tutors who didn't let me out till I knew how to read and kept me there until I understood myself, which led for me to start saying, I want to be Che for the Latin Kings because they saved me. Now, what could I do to save them? I came home in 90, and the regular suspects was around. But the King's problem was that we were trying to run the brand the way we were running it in jail, and in jail it was about security, safety, strength. But when you come home, it's about freedom. So how could you rule guys in the street the way you were ruling them in jail? So you start getting these habits. We went to murder, extortion, and drug dealing. So are these brands, but I won't talk about that. So when I did my assessment like I did in the neighborhood, I found that we were hopeless because we didn't understand who we were, and we became who they told us that we were. We became gangbangers. Before we were revolutionists, they gave us the gangbanger name. We were powerless because everybody feared us, but nobody cared. We really couldn't bring a change to that thought. We were financially secure because we put our things into short-term schemes, Ponzi schemes, selling heroin, everything. You got a lot of money fast, but you went away 20 years, and the money didn't last. So I said, how do I take this? And the most amazing one, you see how they were screaming? You seen the video? We look strong. We looked like we were being careful. They ignored us. The only people who knew about us was the law department, the justice department, not the community. They only feared us. So imagine a brand that was suffering for something like this. So the first thing I did, I delegated the power of taking the jail's mentality and telling them, you run jail the way you want. You get your number one man. He'll send his thoughts out to me. I will strain them and make sure that they fall under the guidelines and the non-negotiable new rules of this nation, which is you can't send out orders that will cause one of us to lose freedom. So after I got them to understand that they were the power and that their ideas were the most important, I told them how to rebuild their community. And how do you rebuild a community? You create safe spaces. Instead of being in the park at night where we used to get high, do a big meeting like you do in your board meetings, but we were dangerous after we got high. It's dark in the park. We thought we were genius by beating each other up and doing things because we thought nobody could see us. Imagine if you had a business meeting in the dark of the night in a park with a couple of beers after you were in the pub. I don't think you're going to create great ideas, right, or come with good solutions. So we went into church. Then I created the Grito de Reyes, the first Latin King paper that used to tell us where all our members were at and all the jobs they were doing that we didn't know that wasn't drug dealing. That wasn't so. We had barbers. We had babysitters. We had people doing all kinds of things, but we didn't have a means to share it. So I showed them how to share the information and how to keep the power within. Then lastly, I did the greatest thing that we ever did for the Almighty Latin King Queen Nation. Before it was called the Latin King Nation. And I told them, if we don't remember our mothers, our sisters, the women who keep us alive when we fall short and end up in jail, and the women we call crying, help us. If they're not with the solution, then we won't change. So we gave the women their rightful place as partners in the movement. Boy, did it change the nation. You should have seen how it went from just men with that tremendous, so we're like, hold up, you don't want to go to jail, sucker. You got to pay the rent this month. You got to change. Imagine that voice. And hey, how about y'all calm down? What that dude did ain't that important. We're going to go to a meeting. When you got those voices that were caring. And then we reached the peak within my knowledge and the knowledge that we had in the leaders that we put in front of our team. And like every brand, I was scared because if you let the outsiders in, they could tell the wrong story, or they could steal an idea, or they could tell a lie. But sorry, Ted, I started to bring in speakers into the universals with meetings that I threw every 30 days in a church in Harlem with 3,000 to 7,000 kids who used to come to hear a message. Imagine that. And I used to put Al Sharpton up, Richie Perez from the Young Lords. And I used to bring all these activists to help us reach the next level. We've reached the ceiling. They broke it for us. And when we didn't like what he said, I do what I do with the clicker. I used to change them. But my rules and regulation and the non-negotiables stood the same with the nation. What is our goal? Freedom. How do we get there? Different avenues. But we're going to stay focused because we want to. That's all we wanted ever. Was the freedom to be a king, to say amor de rey, to go somewhere and to go to work without being chastised. We wanted support. So that's when I said to them, now we got knowledge, we got power, we got direction, but words without actions are dead. A brand that doesn't produce what it promises is something you put in the garbage. So I said, how do we do it? How do we get connected with the community again, where they start leading this newfound power that we had? So this is how it happened. There was this organization called the Mothers Against Police Brutality. And they were out there. And one of their mothers, Miss Byers, who's in the front, son was killed by a cop when his football hit the patrol car in front of his house. The officer was so mad that his car got hit by a football. He argued with Anthony. Anthony argued back. He took him in a chokehold. In 2 minutes, the kid was killed in front of his mother, father, his brothers, in front of his own house. And the sad part was, no politicians came. The pastor wasn't running out with the hallelujah, we're going to march with you. Everybody was scared because they knew if you marched against police, what would happen to you. So I told Ms. Byers, thank you. You just gave me and the Latin Kings a cause to exist that had a value, that had that fiber, that grassroots feeling. And we started the No Justice, No Peace movement in New York from 92 to 98. We got 3 officers put in jail, one for 30 years, one for 15, and one for 8. Not even Hands Up movement could claim that because we did not let them have peace. That was the goal. They can't have peace till Ms. Bias gets justice. And it was the gangbangers who did it. Thank you, not yet. But when you get right, real creative, and you get the new idea and your brand is shining, who comes along? The competition. And all those want to find out, is the brand real? Is the idea original? Does it really work? Do those people really want to stay on Mars? Right? We want to know. How do we find out? Is King Tone a prophet or the Antichrist? So who comes along? The media. To tell the story. But remember, they never really want to tell your story. They want to tell the story that gives them the ratings and tell it the way that the powers that be, fake news, you know that word, right? So then what we did, me and my team, we said, how can we tell our story? Because you get one Super Bowl time. You get one commercial to tell the world your story. And it's coming. How do we prepare for these people? How do we use their enthusiasm and greed to get us out there in the news so they could get ratings, but still tell our part of the story after they cut and edit everything that's good and just makes us into a gang again? The team said, don't worry about the bad. Because as soon as all those people in South America and everybody see you talking that shit tone, they're going to want to be kings. I said, let's go. So we draw skids. So I did the first reality shows. So ABC gave me cameras and said, just take us to those events. Show us how you really get down. So we had 3 skids formulated where we played out the very exact things we were really doing in the street, but they wasn't real. It was us acting it out. So if something would have went wrong, right, in the real deal, they would have filmed it and used it against us, and that would have took the community away from that look of us fighting the drug dealers and going in hard into neighborhoods and chasing out that was what's wrong. And they got taped skits, and they never knew it, and to this day they got it on YouTube. King Tone, stop drug dealers in the school park. It was a fucking skid. But you and everybody thought that I was silly enough to give them everything. You can't. And that's what I learned with the opponent. You could use them, you could let them in your house, you could let them see things. You could even share them. But don't negotiate away the non-negotiables of your idea and the principle of what you do for one moment. It could destroy everything you worked. So after I got my minute of fame, and the news knew it, and the Kings was marching proud, and we were leaving a roadmap for other groups to how you leave something called a gang and become a power group. See how I changed the brand? Gave it a new name. We're power groups. If we eliminate the stinking thinking, we're power groups. If we eliminate the crime, we got the unity. We could fight for justice. You know this guy, then Goliath came out. I don't know if you've seen him, but he is the new lawyer and voice piece for Mr. Trump's lies. As a lawyer, he defends Trump. And he says, and he empowers his craziness. This used to be the New York State DA and federal DA, and he was the one who put me in jail. And I remember the time when he knew the lie from a truth. I remember when he used to claim that he was for justice. Now he's forgot all that. But he came against me all force. He said gangsters don't change. If we give you sewing machines, if I will give you program tone, you and them dummies will stay the same. Gangsters. And I put up a fight against them, but without resources. Without the power really of money. Like you hear a lot of these great ideas. What you hear them? The money. We don't got money. People will invest in hamburgers more than they will invest in children. They will go for an idea that we eat better than me rescuing kids out of gangs. Because that is the society we live in. And he said to me, you know what? I'm going to put so much pressure that you're going to go back to your ways. You know I didn't have to. But as a CEO and the pressure of losing my house, my job, and having nothing, I said, just one time if I do something, I could get this idea. And if I put the values again to the side, I could make it, and nobody will know I was back in the park in the dark. I had 7,000 kids, and I didn't want to use them to rob a bank so I could get the money that I needed to pay my rent. HBO said I was the most powerful man in New York. I didn't have a license. I didn't have a right to vote. And I was on parole. I was powerless, really. And I fell. And I thought I did something. And that move was, I said, well, if I do what I did with the heroin, I make one good sale, or I look out for one, I could pay this bill and the movement moves on. You know, some of us with ideas when we take shortcuts, when a CEO stops changing the brand's books, and I was back again. Giuliani gave me 13 and a half years for being a conspirator to a lookout to a drug sale. Out of those 13 and a half years, and to give me that, he gave me 130 co-defendants. And I found myself doing 13 years with 3 years with no human contact. For 24 hours a day, 3 years, I didn't know if the sun came out or came down because they painted my window black. I was on Mars, damn it. And in that moment of loneliness, and like he said, I said, what do I do and how do I fix it? I looked in the mirror and I remember what my father and mother told me in the beginning of this voyage of getting rich. You're already rich, son. I never been to jail. I've worked 60 years, and now me and your mother celebrating 65 years married, and you could come to the visit because you'll be home by then. And while they're telling me this, they gave me my first phone call from that prison cell after the 3 years to call my mom's. And I got on, and King Tone started crying like a girl. Ah, they treated me bad, Mom. I'm doing 24 hours, and they don't let me see people, and I can't call you. What do I do? I'm going crazy alone. She said, son, I love you. We're growing. We're good. But you told the people to hope in you and believe in your message. And you know what? I believe in you now, son. You said you were King Tone. Be King Tone. Fix it. Come home and start this again. The people are waiting for you, son. And it gave me that spirit of hope. It said, what are you doing, man? And in that solitude and in that loneliness, I made my small business, my idea called Grow Up, Grow Out, where I work with 9-year-olds to 22-year-olds. And I go to governments and I teach the Justice Department, the community, the lawmakers, and the power groups to come to a safe space and tell each other their problems and tell them why they're making these decisions that alienate each other. And I bring them in a group and I make them right. That's a scientist. That's the head dean of a Catholic church in Ecuador. Those are professors. It takes a village. It takes a team. It takes us to listen to each other. Oppression leads to aggression, which leads to violence, which leads to no good energy. And we resolve our problems. That's in Ecuador with the interior minister. We took 3,000 kings. We worked with them 10 years. We made them into a political group. We got now in Ecuador for the last 10 years, murders, 3 murders per 300,000 people. There's not a state in America that could claim that. We took 20 gangs and we reduced them to 3 by an 18-month program involving community, justice department, and colleges, empowering the gang leader to then lead his people to salvation, to the things we give them as they play. Because I was bold enough to ask this question to my gang. What does love look like in a gang? What does having values before we go to the street and we put on these black and gold colors and we march? What do we represent? What does it look like to our community, that love? And I ask you, what does love look like in your brand? What does it look like in your next idea? Keep the values, and like my mother used to say, every good thing will follow. Thank you.